Hello, my name is Olivia. I want to tell you about something that changed my life. It's the story of how I learned to think in English first, and then speak it with real confidence. I didn't always speak English well. In fact, I used to freeze every time someone asked me something in English. But everything started to change the day I decided to stop memorizing and start thinking in English. For a long time, I thought I would never speak English like other people did. I used to watch movies in English and see how smoothly the characters spoke. Their words came fast, like water from a tap. They didn't stop. They didn't look nervous. But me? Even when I knew what I wanted to say, I just couldn't say it quickly. I always had to think in my language first, then try to change it into English. And every time I did that, I got stuck. Let me tell you how it was. If I wanted to say, I am going to the store, my mind first said that sentence in my own language. Then I tried to translate it into English. But sometimes I forgot one word. Or I changed the sentence halfway. Or I made a mistake with the grammar. And when that happened, I felt embarrassed. I didn't want to speak again. This kept happening again and again. And because of that, I started to avoid speaking English. I thought I needed to memorize more words or study more grammar, but the truth was different. One afternoon, something happened. I was sitting in my room, feeling frustrated. I had just watched an English interview online. The girl in the video spoke so clearly, so naturally. She wasn't even a native speaker. She came from a country like mine. But her English felt so real, so smooth. She said something that stuck with me. She said, I stopped thinking in my own language. I started living in English. That hit me hard. Living in English? What did that mean? That night, I kept thinking about her words. Living in English. Maybe she meant she didn't wait to speak. Maybe she didn't translate. Maybe she thought in English first. That idea felt powerful. I sat up on my bed and looked around my room. I saw my pillow. I said out loud, pillow. I saw my lamp and said lamp. I smiled a little. It felt easy. For the first time, I didn't try to translate. I just named things. The next morning, I started doing this again. I woke up and said blanket. I touched the curtain and said, curtain. I walked to the kitchen and said, glass, spoon, tea. I didn't care about grammar. I didn't care about full sentences. I just named things around me in English. And it felt like something was changing inside me. My mind stopped working so hard. It didn't have to go from one language to another. It just started using English directly. I continued this small practice every day. I made it a habit. I would name things while brushing my hair. Comb, mirror, hair tie. I would do it while cleaning. Dusting. Table, floor. I didn't miss a chance. If I didn't know a word, I would look it up on my phone, and then I would repeat it a few times so it stayed in my memory. I also started labeling some things in my house with sticky notes. My desk had a note, desk. My cupboard said closet. My fan had a note, fan. It looked funny, but it worked. One day, I was walking in the market, and suddenly I noticed I was naming things in my mind without even trying. Banana. Apples, basket. Vendor. I wasn't translating. I was thinking in English, naturally. I couldn't believe it. My brain had started to work in English, just like it worked in my native language. I felt proud. And not only that, I felt free. I didn't have to fear speaking now because English was already part of my thoughts. There was another moment that made me smile. I was watching a little child play with her toys, and she was saying things like, car goes vroom, and doll sleepy now. She wasn't thinking too much. She was just saying what came to her mind. That's what I wanted too. To think simple and speak simple. That night, I stood in front of my mirror and said, Olivia, you are thinking in English now. That is the first step. But I didn't stop there. Just naming things was good, but I wanted more. I wanted to live in English. I wanted to talk to myself, not just say words. I wanted to speak to my own thoughts. So I asked myself a question. Can I make full sentences in my mind? At that moment, I looked at the cup of tea in my hand and said quietly in my head, I am drinking tea. It's hot and sweet. Then I looked at my room and thought, my bed is messy. I need to clean it. It was the beginning of something new. The more I did it, the more confident I felt. I realized that when we stop translating, we remove fear. Because translation is slow. It makes us check every word. But thinking directly in English is fast. It lets our brain build new paths. It lets us become English speakers, not just English learners. Soon, naming things became part of my daily life. I no longer had to try hard. I would walk outside and think, sky is blue. Wind is cold today. I looked at people and thought, she looks tired. He is smiling. I even started thinking about my feelings in English. I'm feeling a little nervous, but I'm trying my best. That was big for me, because emotions are real, and when you start thinking about real things in English, it changes everything. I still remember the day I helped my little cousin with her homework. She was learning the names of animals. I pointed to each picture and said them out loud. Lion, tiger, elephant, monkey, she repeated after me. Then she asked, how do you know so many English words, Olivia? I smiled and said, because I see them in my mind every day. That's when I knew English had become part of me. I didn't stop translating by chance. I did it by practice. I didn't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect words. I just started naming everything around me every day. And with time, it became a habit, a powerful one. It made English feel like my own language, but I still wanted to grow more. Naming things was only the first step. I wanted to talk to myself in English, not out loud yet, but inside my thoughts. I wanted to build my own little world in English, a world where I could think freely and feel safe. And that's where the next part of my journey began. After I started naming everything around me in English, something inside me changed. I felt more confident, more open. English was no longer just a subject in school or a scary test. It was slowly becoming my second language, alive and close to me. But I knew that naming things wasn't enough. If I wanted to speak fluently and confidently, I had to move further. I had to learn how to think in full English sentences, not just single words. I remember one quiet evening when I was walking to the park near my house. It was a peaceful walk. There were trees around me, birds singing, and people sitting on benches. As I walked, I started doing what had become my habit. I named the things I saw. Tree, bird, bench, stroller, dog. But suddenly I felt a thought rising in my mind. That man is reading a book. I stopped walking for a second. I didn't translate this thought. I didn't plan it. It just came to me, fully in English. That was the moment I realized I was ready for more. That night, when I was lying on my bed with the lights off, I kept thinking about that simple sentence. That man is reading a book. It felt beautiful, not because it was a big sentence, but because it came without effort. That's when I decided I wanted to build a whole world inside my mind, using only English. A place where every thought, every idea, and every feeling would happen in English. I didn't know exactly how to do it, but I knew I could start small. The next morning, I tried something new. Instead of just naming the objects in my kitchen, I started talking to myself silently while cooking. I'm pouring water into the kettle. Now I'm opening the sugar jar. This spoon is dirty. I need a clean one. These were simple thoughts, but they were full. They had verbs, actions, and meaning. And all of them were in English. No one could hear me, but in my mind, I was having a full conversation. It made the boring task of making tea feel like a language class, with no teacher, no pressure, and no fear. Soon I made this a daily practice. I would walk around my house and describe everything I was doing in English. I'm folding my clothes. I have too many socks. Where is my white shirt? Oh, it's under the towel. I didn't try to speak these words out loud. I just thought them again and again. And slowly, my thoughts began to switch. I didn't realize when it happened, but after a few weeks, I noticed I wasn't thinking in my native language anymore, not when I was doing simple daily things. My mind had started to use English first. There was one morning I remember clearly. I woke up and thought, I don't want to get out of bed. The sentence came so fast, I didn't even notice it was in English. Then I thought, I have to wash my hair today. Again in English. I smiled, lying there with my messy hair and sleepy eyes, because I knew I was changing. I wasn't just practicing English. I was becoming a person who lives in English. From that day, I created a small world inside my mind. I filled it with English sentences. I imagined talking to people, answering questions, even having full conversations. On the bus, I would look out the window and think, the traffic is slow today. That man looks tired. The sky is gray, maybe it will rain later. While waiting in line at the grocery store, I would say silently to myself, I hope I didn't forget the eggs. I should buy some extra milk. This line is so long. Every small thought became an English sentence. I didn't need a classroom. My mind was my classroom. I also started making pretend conversations in my head. For example, I would imagine someone asking me, what do you like to eat for breakfast? Then I'd think of my answer. I like toast and eggs. And sometimes I drink orange juice. Then I'd imagine another question. What do you do in your free time? And I'd answer, I like reading books, watching English shows, and taking long walks. These were just imaginary talks, but they helped me so much. They prepared me for real conversations. Sometimes I would create small stories in my head. Nothing too big, just short scenes. I would imagine I was in a bookstore and someone asked me, can I help you find something? And I would say, yes, I'm looking for a book about learning English. Or I'd imagine I was at a party and someone asked, how do you know the host? And I'd reply, she's my college friend. We studied together. I did this when I was walking, eating, or even lying in bed. My brain was working in English all the time. This practice made a big difference. Because when someone asked me something in real life, I already had the sentences in my mind. I had practiced them so many times in my imaginary world, they came out smoothly. I didn't have to panic. I didn't have to search for words. They were already sitting in my brain waiting to be used. One special thing happened during this time. I began to feel emotions in English, too. I know it sounds strange, but it's true. When I was feeling nervous, I didn't say to myself, I am scared in my native language. I said it in English. I'm nervous. I hope everything goes well. When I was happy, I said, this is a good day. I'm feeling great today. When I was sad, I said, it's okay to feel down sometimes. I just need rest. This helped me trust English even more. It became my second voice, the voice I used for my deep, honest thoughts. I didn't always get the grammar right. Sometimes I used the wrong tense. Sometimes I forgot a word, but I didn't stop. I didn't correct myself every time. My goal was not perfection. My goal was practice. The more I used English in my mind, the easier it became. After a few months, my thoughts were 70% English and 30% my own language, then 80%, then 90%. And one day I realized that English was now my default. My first thought, my first language of feeling. There was a day I was walking through a bookstore and I picked up a notebook. I opened it and saw blank pages. Right there, I thought. I want to write my thoughts here, in English. I bought that notebook. And every night, I started writing just 1 or 2 sentences about my day in English. Nothing big. Just that today I felt tired, but I finished my work. Or it rained this evening. I made soup. It felt warm. These short notes helped me make my English world stronger. Even my dreams started to change. One morning, I woke up and remembered that I had spoken English in my dream. It was a simple dream. I was talking to someone about books, but everything we said was in English. That dream made me cry a little, not because I was sad, but because I was proud. My brain had accepted English. It was no longer a stranger. It was now a guest who had become family. My world of English thoughts became my quiet teacher. It didn't judge me. It didn't laugh at my mistakes. It didn't rush me. It just stayed with me, helped me grow, and gave me the courage I needed. But I knew I still had one big fear to face: speaking out loud. It was easy to think in English. It was safe. It was quiet. But what would happen when I had to use my voice? Would the words come out right? Would I sound okay? I had spent months building my English world inside my mind. Now, I wanted to let that world come outside, through my own voice. So, one morning, I stood in front of my mirror. I looked at myself, smiled, and said, "Good morning, Olivia. How are you today?" And that small sentence became the beginning of a whole new step. That morning, as I stood in front of the mirror and said, "Good morning, Olivia. How are you today?" something shifted inside me. It was the first time I had ever spoken to myself in English out loud. Not whispered. Not mumbled. Not inside my thoughts. But really, truly, using my voice. It was just one small sentence, yet it felt like I had crossed a big wall. It felt strange and exciting at the same time. My own voice in English sounded different from what I imagined. It didn't sound like the perfect voices from English movies, but it was my voice, and that made it special. For weeks I had been building a whole world in my mind, filling it with English words, sentences, thoughts, and dreams. I had grown comfortable thinking in English, silently and safely. But now I wanted more. I wanted to speak, not just think. I wanted to say the words with my mouth, hear them with my ears, and let my voice learn to trust English too. At first I felt shy, even though I was alone. I know it sounds silly, but saying English words out loud made me nervous. Even when no one was there, I was afraid I would sound wrong. I worried that I would pronounce things badly or mix up my grammar. But then I reminded myself, no one was listening. This was my private space, my learning space. I could make as many mistakes as I wanted and no one would laugh. That thought gave me strength. It reminded me that the fear was only in my head, not in the room. So I made a small plan. Every morning, after I woke up and brushed my teeth, I would stand in front of the mirror and have a short conversation with myself in English. I didn't try to be perfect. I just talked like a friend. Sometimes I asked myself questions like, "What are you going to do today?" and answered, "I will clean my room and call my friend." Other times I just made simple comments like, "You look tired today," or "You need more sleep." Slowly, the mirror became my practice partner. I could see my mouth moving. I could hear my words. And most importantly, I could feel myself growing. I didn't stop at the mirror. I started speaking out loud in other moments too, small, everyday moments. When I was cooking in the kitchen, I would say, "I'm cutting onions." Now I'm boiling rice. When I was washing dishes, I would say, "These plates are so many. I should have cleaned earlier." I wasn't performing for anyone. I was just practicing, letting English flow from my thoughts to my voice. One day, while folding laundry, I had an idea. I would pretend I was teaching someone English. I held up a shirt and said, "This is a shirt. The shirt is blue. It is soft." Then I held up a towel and said, "This is a towel. Towels are used after a shower." I laughed at myself, but I kept going. I made little lessons for an imaginary student. This fun game helped me repeat words, describe things, and use short sentences again and again. Over time, I began to notice something. My mouth was becoming faster. The words didn't feel stuck anymore. In the beginning, my tongue would trip over long sentences. But after days and weeks of speaking out loud when I was alone, my tongue learned how to move smoothly. I learned how to say things naturally. It wasn't just about thinking in English anymore. Now I was talking in English, even if no one was there. I also discovered that tone matters. I paid attention to my voice. When I was happy, I would try to say things in an excited way. "This cake looks amazing." When I was tired, I would say, "Today was a long day." I wasn't just saying words. I was practicing emotions, feelings, and real-life speaking. I learned that English wasn't just about vocabulary. It was about expression, too. One afternoon, I was sitting by the window, watching the rain. I whispered to myself, "The sky is crying today." It wasn't a common sentence, but it felt poetic, and it came from my heart. That sentence stayed with me. It reminded me that my English voice didn't have to copy others. It could sound like me. I could use simple words to say deep things. And that made me fall in love with speaking even more. There was a time I started reading children's books out loud. I chose books with easy sentences and big pictures. As I read, I didn't just say the words, I acted them out. If a bear in the story was sleepy, I said, "The bear is sleepy," in a tired voice. If a character was excited, I smiled and read with energy. It was like playing a role. It helped me connect sound with meaning. And the best part? I was having fun. I forgot I was studying. I was just enjoying English. Reading aloud helped me with pronunciation, too. I would stop at new words, search for their correct sound online, repeat them, and move on. Every time I learned a new word, I said it 5 times. I didn't just want to know the meaning. I wanted my mouth to remember the word. That's something I never did before. But now it felt important, because I wasn't learning for tests. I was learning to speak. Even in the bathroom, I practiced. While brushing my hair, I would say, "Your hair is soft today." While washing my face, I'd say, "I need cold water. It wakes me up." No moment was too small for practice. My alone time became my training ground. There was no schedule, no classroom, just me and my voice. But something special happened after all this quiet practice. One day, I was at a local shop buying some snacks. The shopkeeper asked me in English, "Would you like a bag?" Without thinking, I answered, "Yes, please." The words came out so easily. I surprised myself. I walked home smiling that day because I realized that all my private speaking had finally prepared me for public moments. After that day, I became more serious about my alone speaking sessions. I set a new rule for myself. I had to talk out loud to myself for at least 10 minutes every day. It could be while cooking, cleaning, walking, or even sitting quietly. The only condition was I had to speak the words, not just think them. I also started using my phone's voice recorder. Sometimes I would record myself talking about my day, like, "Today I went to the market. I bought some fresh oranges. They were sweet and juicy." Then I would listen to my voice. I would ask myself, "Do I sound clear?" Did I speak too fast or too slow? I wasn't judging myself. I was learning from myself. I noticed some habits, like sometimes I used the same words again and again. So I made a small list of new words to try. Little by little, my vocabulary grew, and so did my confidence. Sometimes I even practiced small speeches. I would stand straight, look into the mirror, and say, "Hello, my name is Olivia. Today I want to talk about how I started learning English." I would pretend I was on stage. I practiced eye contact, hand movement, and speaking clearly. This made me feel brave, even if my audience was just the walls of my bedroom. Speaking out loud when I was alone gave me a gift no teacher ever could, the gift of comfort. I became comfortable with my own voice in English. I stopped being scared of how I sounded. I stopped waiting for perfection. I just spoke, and with every word I became stronger. By now, speaking alone had become my secret superpower, but I knew I had to take the next step. I had practiced with myself long enough. It was time to share my voice with others, maybe with a friend, maybe with a family member, or even online. I was ready to test everything I had learned. I still remember the moment clearly. I was sitting at my laptop, messaging an online English group. I typed, "Would anyone like to practice speaking with me?" A girl named Mia replied, "Sure, I'd love to." And just like that, the next chapter began. After I messaged that online English group and Mia replied, "Sure, I'd love to," I stared at the screen for a long moment. My heart was beating fast. I was nervous, but I was also ready. For months, I had been preparing in silence, thinking in English, speaking alone, practicing every day with no one watching. Now, it was time to try speaking with a real person. I knew it wouldn't be perfect, but I also knew I had to take that step. I reminded myself again and again, "You've done the work, Olivia. Now just be brave." We agreed to do a short voice call the next day. I prepared a little. I made a list of simple questions and answers on a piece of paper, just in case I forgot something. Things like, "What's your name?" "Oh, where are you from?" What do you like to do?" I practiced the answers to those questions in front of the mirror. I even recorded myself saying them to check my voice and speed. I didn't want to sound like I was reading, but I also didn't want to freeze during the call. When the time came, I sat in a quiet room, took a deep breath, and answered the video call. Mia was smiling. She looked friendly. That helped a little. She said, "Hi, Olivia." And I smiled back and said, "Hi, Mia. Nice to meet you." And that's how it began. The call was short, maybe 15 minutes. We talked about easy things, the weather, our hobbies, what we did that day. I made a few mistakes. I forgot a word once or twice. But something amazing happened. I didn't panic. I didn't feel small. I just kept going. Mia was kind. She spoke slowly, and when I paused, she waited. That call gave me a kind of confidence I had never felt before. It was like opening a small door and realizing the outside world wasn't so scary after all. I thanked her after the call and told her it was my first time talking to someone in English like that. She said, "You did great. Let's do it again soon." I was proud of myself, not because I spoke perfectly, but because I tried. That night, I slept with a smile on my face. After that call, I made a promise to myself. Every week, I would try to talk to at least one person in English, even if it was just for 5 minutes, even if it was just to say hello. I joined more English learning groups online. I introduced myself in small messages. "Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm learning English and want to practice speaking. Anyone want to talk?" Some people didn't reply, and that was okay. But some people did. And every small conversation helped me grow. I also started using English in real-life situations. One day I went to a coffee shop near my home. The man at the counter greeted me in English. Usually I would answer in my own language. But that day I smiled and said, "Hi, I'd like a cappuccino, please." He nodded and said, "Sure." Just 2 lines, but I walked out of that shop feeling like I had won a medal. My hands were shaking and my heart was beating fast, but I did it. And I wanted to do it again, so I looked for more moments like that. When I went to the grocery store, I asked, "Do you have fresh oranges today?" When I visited the pharmacy, I said, "I'm looking for vitamin C tablets." These were small, simple sentences, but each one was a victory. Each one reminded me that I didn't have to wait until my English was perfect to use it. I could use what I had right now. And every time I used it, I got better. There was one afternoon I still remember clearly. I was walking in the park, and an older woman sat next to me on the bench. She smiled and said, "Nice weather today, isn't it?" I paused for a second. Then I smiled back and said, "Yes, very sunny." "I like it." That was it. Just a small exchange. But it felt big. Because it wasn't planned. It wasn't practice. It was real. And I didn't feel scared. I felt calm. At home, I started practicing possible conversations in my mind. Just like before, but now with a new goal. I wanted to be ready to speak out loud with real people. I imagined situations. What if someone asked me what I do? I practiced, "I'm learning English and working part-time." What if someone asks me what my favorite food is? I practiced, "I like pasta and spicy food." These imaginary talks helped me prepare for real life. So when someone actually asked me something, I had an answer ready. It gave me confidence. One day, I met a tourist near the bus stop. He looked lost and asked, "Do you know where this museum is?" I had been there before, so I replied, "Yes, walk straight and then turn left. It's near the big library." He said, "Thank you." I nodded and smiled. I didn't feel nervous at all. I felt helpful. And I felt proud that my English helped someone else. After that, I began to enjoy small conversations. I didn't wait for them. I started them. In stores, I would say, "Hello, how are you today?" to the cashier. When I saw someone wearing something nice, I'd say, "I like your jacket. It's really cool." Most people smiled and replied kindly. No one ever laughed at my English. In fact, some people looked surprised, in a good way. I started to understand something important. When we speak with honesty, people listen with kindness. I also started talking more with my cousins who were learning English too. We made a rule, only English during lunch. It was funny at first. We made mistakes and laughed a lot. Sometimes we forgot simple words. One day I wanted to say salt, but I said white spicy thing. Everyone laughed, but we kept trying. These moments made learning fun. And because we were all trying, no one felt judged. One of my favorite memories was a short talk I had with a little girl. I was visiting a friend's house, and her daughter, who was about 6, came up to me and said in English, "My name is Emily, what's your name?" I replied, "My name is Olivia." "Nice to meet you, Emily." She smiled proudly and ran away. It was a simple moment, but something about it felt beautiful. A little child and I, speaking the same language, not perfectly, but clearly. It showed me how powerful language is, how it connects people. As time passed, I realized that small conversations were like small steps. Each step made me stronger. I didn't need to run. I just needed to keep walking. My English didn't have to be fancy. It just had to be real. And slowly I stopped fearing mistakes. I started focusing on connection. Because that's what language is really about. Not showing how smart you are, but building bridges between hearts. I also noticed something else. My fear of speaking was getting smaller. Before, I used to worry about people judging me. Now I focused on sharing a message. I started to think, it's okay if I make a mistake. I'm learning, and this mindset gave me freedom. It allowed me to take more chances, speak more often, and enjoy the process. I began helping others too. In my English group, new learners would join and feel shy. I remembered how I felt at the beginning. So I messaged them and said, I know it's scary, but don't worry. We can talk slowly together. I practiced with them, just like Mia had practiced with me. That made me feel even better, because by helping others, I was also helping myself. Now, small conversations are part of my life. I speak English when I order food, when I ask for directions, when I compliment someone, or when I meet someone new. I don't always speak perfectly, but I speak confidently. I've learned that confidence doesn't come after perfection. It comes before it. You gain confidence by doing, not by waiting. And I've done it, one small conversation at a time. But I wasn't done. I had one more step to take. I wanted to use English with people I love, with my family, my close friends. I wanted to bring English into my everyday life, not just public places or online. I knew it would be strange at first. They were used to hearing me speak in our own language. But I also knew this was the final bridge. If I could practice with the people closest to me, I could speak English anywhere, anytime, with anyone. So one evening, I sat down with my younger cousin, looked at her and said, let's try something fun. Let's talk in English for 10 minutes. She laughed and said, okay. And just like that, the next part of my journey began. When my younger cousin agreed to talk in English for 10 minutes, I didn't know that moment would be the beginning of something very special in my journey. We sat across from each other on the couch and looked at each other with wide smiles and nervous eyes. You start, she said, trying to hold back her laughter. So I asked her, what's your favorite animal? She paused and said, I think cat. We both laughed and I said, me too. Cats are cute. That simple exchange was full of mistakes and pauses, but something magical happened. We were using English in our own living room, with no fear, just joy. I could feel how natural it was starting to become for me. This wasn't a test. This wasn't practice in front of a mirror. This was real-life English shared with someone close to me. After that day, I decided to bring English into every corner of my daily life. I wasn't just going to think in English during quiet walks or in front of the mirror. I was going to make it part of everything. My mornings, my routines, my habits, my surroundings. I wanted English to be everywhere. And I didn't want it to be something I tried anymore. I wanted it to be something I lived. The next morning I woke up and spoke softly. Good morning, Olivia. How did you sleep? I answered, pretty well. I had a strange dream, though. As I stretched, I said out loud, time to start the day. I looked out the window and thought, the sun is up. It looks warm today. Every step I took, I narrated my actions. I'm brushing my teeth. Now I'm choosing a dress. I feel like wearing blue today. And then, when I left my room and saw my mother in the kitchen, I switched back to our usual language and said good morning. But in my head, I was still thinking in English. She made tea. It smells nice. I'm hungry today. This balance of using English inside and outside, of switching naturally, helped me a lot. I didn't force anything. I just let English flow through my day like water flowing through a stream. As I walked to the market later that day, I played a small game with myself. I looked at people and silently made short English sentences about them. She is holding flowers. He looks tired. That girl is laughing with her friend. It was like a movie in my head, and I was the narrator. I noticed that these thoughts didn't feel strange anymore. I wasn't translating. I wasn't struggling. I was thinking in English. One time I stood in a long line at the grocery store. Usually I would scroll through my phone, but this time I used that moment to practice silently. I looked at the items in my basket and started thinking. Milk, eggs, bananas, cereal. I forgot to buy butter. I watched the people around me and thought, the man behind me is in a hurry. The cashier is talking politely. That small moment, which used to be boring, became a lesson. And the best part? I was teaching myself. At home, I kept doing this. When I cleaned my room, I thought in English. The floor is dirty. I need to sweep. Where is the broom? When I cooked, I spoke my steps out loud. Cut the onions. Add salt, stir slowly. Even during TV commercials. I would repeat short lines or answer questions as if I were part of the show. This habit made my English stronger every day. Not because I studied more, but because I lived more in English. I also started changing small things in my environment. I changed my phone language to English. I followed English content creators on social media. I put sticky notes on my bedroom wall with daily sentences like, "What are you grateful for today? Speak slowly, speak clearly. Mistakes are proof that you are learning." Every time I read these, I felt motivated. They weren't just words, they were reminders that I was on the right path. One day, I sat in the park with a notebook. I decided to write whatever I was feeling in English. Not a perfect story, not an essay, just simple thoughts. I'm feeling peaceful today. The sky is blue. The wind is soft. I hear birds. I wrote everything that came to my mind. No rules, no checking. Just writing as I thought. After 10 minutes, I looked at the page and realized something. I had written a full page without even realizing I was using English. That was the moment I truly believed, yes, Olivia, this is real. You're thinking in English now. From that day on, I carried that notebook with me. I called it my thought diary. Whenever I had a free moment, I wrote something in English. Sometimes it was about my feelings, like, I feel lonely today. Other times it was about things I wanted, like, I want to travel to a new place. And sometimes it was silly. I ate too many cookies. But everything I wrote helped my thoughts stay in English. The more I wrote, the more I could speak. There was a morning I was talking to my mother, and in the middle of the conversation, I accidentally said something in English. I didn't even notice. She laughed and said, "What did you just say?" I smiled, a little embarrassed. But deep inside, I was happy. It showed me that English had become my natural voice, even when I wasn't trying. After that, I started dreaming in English more often. It wasn't every night, but it happened. Sometimes the dream was simple. I was ordering food. I was asking questions. I was talking to strangers. But I remembered the words, the rhythm, the feeling of using English without fear. My brain had accepted English not just as a subject, but as a second home. One day, I was watching a documentary, and I paused it to repeat what the narrator said. The elephants travel long distances for water. I said it again. The elephants travel long distances for water. I looked at myself in the mirror and said it with feeling, like I was the narrator. This small activity helped me a lot. I practiced repeating sentences from movies, YouTube videos, and podcasts. I copied their voice, their style. It made me feel connected. It made me feel ready to use English anywhere. And then something big happened. I got invited to a group video call with English learners from different countries. I was scared at first, but I said yes. On the call, we all introduced ourselves. When it was my turn, I said, "Hi, I'm Olivia from City. I started thinking in English a few months ago. It changed my life." People smiled and nodded. Some even clapped. I felt a wave of warmth and pride in my heart. All my private practice had led me to this public moment, and I was not afraid. After the call, one girl messaged me privately. She said, "Your English is so natural. How did you learn?" I replied, "I started small. I stopped translating. I named things. I talked to myself. And I thought in English everywhere." She said, "That gives me hope." I realized in that moment I was no longer just a learner. I was an example. Now, English is part of everything I do. When I think in English. When I walk, I describe the world in English. When I feel something deeply, joy, sadness, excitement, I express it in English. It doesn't mean I've forgotten my own language. Not at all, but it means I've grown. I've added a new way to speak, feel, and understand the world. Sometimes I sit quietly and remember the girl I used to be, the Olivia, who froze when someone asked her name in English. The Olivia who translated everything in her head and said nothing out loud. The Olivia who thought she could never speak fluently. And now I look at the Olivia I've become. The one who speaks, who thinks, who laughs in English, not perfectly, but with joy and confidence. And I know now that confidence didn't come from a big class or a fancy course. It came from daily choices, from tiny actions, from speaking to my reflection, from whispering while I walked, from writing in my notebook, from saying hello to strangers, from thinking in English everywhere. That's my story. That's my truth. And if you're still wondering when to start, let me tell you something simple. Start now. Speak now. Think now. It doesn't matter where you are. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need one small sentence. From that, a whole world can grow.